Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book, How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Come unwrap some holiday magic this season in Denver, where the lights are brighter and the shopping is grander, where the season feels a whole lot more wonderful. Discover great hotels and more things to do at milehighholidays.com.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey y'all, how is it going? What is up? It's me, your girl, your host, your newly 26-year-old, Elena Grace, and you're listening to another episode of I've Been Thinking. If you've been here before, welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back, as always. And if you're new here, welcome. This is a fun one. I'm really excited for this episode, okay? Before we get into it, I want to go ahead and remind you all that if you are not already a patron on our Patreon page and you have the means to do that, I would appreciate that so much. We have a handful right now, we're working on more, a handful of Patreon exclusive content. We have an outtake from last week's episode with Devin Hale that you guys are just going to love. It is a really beautiful little piece of conversation where we talk about spirituality and, our thoughts on life and all of that stuff. And I'm just really proud of that little bit. And then, oh no, my computer almost died. Anyway, and then we also have early episodes available there. So every week, your regular episode is going to be available on Patreon for you at least a day early, if not more. Sometimes I give you like a week early. It just depends on how I'm feeling, how froggy I am. So definitely go check out the Patreon. I would be so grateful for your support there. And on that note, I want to thank the people who did join the Patreon since last week. A few of Devin's community have joined the Patreon, and a few of my friends have joined, and I'm just so thankful for all of you who listen, but also those of you who are able to give that little bit of support. It would be a dream come true for me to make this podcast my gig that pays the bills, right? That would just be an absolute dream. And those people who do provide some financial support, you're each giving me a step closer to making that dream a reality, but you're also making it possible for me to just continue doing this in general, because it allows me to pay for my hosting service and to pay for, right now, the little treats that I love to give you guys just for listening in general, like the stickers and all of that stuff. So I really, truly do appreciate all of you who have supported me so far, and I would love to have more of you come on Patreon and become members of the community there. Because that's really what I want to do, is I want to build a community around this podcast where we can learn from each other and we can share our weird niche knowledge and all of that stuff. It's a lot of fun for me, and I want it to be fun for you guys too. So I hope that I am providing. Anyway, like I said, just a little quick life update. Monday, July 26th was my birthday, and I just had the best weekend. And so all of those Patreon members who came in over the past week, y'all have given me an incredible birthday present. Just having just a handful of subscribers is incredible. But yeah, Monday was my birthday. And I got to celebrate all weekend with my friends, and I was actually telling them a little bit about what today's episode was going to be, and they were pretty excited. So I hope that you all enjoy. Today, we are going to be talking about the conspiracy theories surrounding the sinking of the Titanic. Now, as we all know, major events in human history have a habit of creating conspiracies, especially if they're super tragic or like entirely, completely unexpected. There's actually a similar related episode to this coming up in the next few months about how paranormal events skyrocket in the wake of a tragedy. So I'm really excited about that. I hope that you guys kind of get excited about it now too. But, that's just an example of how people are looking for ways to understand or look for closure or, just hope that it couldn't have been just a freak accident, because that means that we really have no control. So, people just like to come up with alternate theories, I think. And that gives us a feeling of control, And so I think that's why conspiracy theories are really common, especially about things that just seem so unbelievable to our little tiny human primate brains. Like it's a very popular conspiracy today that the moon landing was faked. And if you haven't seen, this is one of my favorite videos in the entire world. If you haven't seen the video of Buzz Aldrin frickin' decking a guy over accusing him of faking the moon landing, I highly recommend. I will link it in the blog post for today. I love that video. 20 years later, people are still convinced that 9/11 was an inside job, or that it was this or that or otherwise. People think that the KGB had JFK killed. People think that the FBI killed MLK. Wow, that was a lot of letters. But the thing is, some of these things just seem so wild and so out there, but some of them actually hold some serious plausibility and some truth. And the fact that on occasion these wild theories can actually be accurate or hold accuracies. I mean, stories that are so bold that it seems like it couldn't have even been thought up by Netflix's most ostentatious writers, but they're actual real-world scenarios. It just makes the conspiracies harder to discount. Like, if those crazy things actually did happen, who is to say that this other crazy scenario didn't, right? So, that is why I'm here today to tell you about one of the latest trending conspiracies, the sinking of the Titanic. Late in the evening on April 14th, 1912, the RMS Titanic hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic. The unsinkable, quote-unquote, ship sinks into the freezing water, and 1,517 of the 2,223 passengers and crew are killed. Again, in a classically human attempt to make sense of these things, people have spent literally the past century trying to figure out why she sank and why these lives were lost. Like, it did not take long after the sinking for people to start conspiring. Oh my gosh. Okay, anyway. So the biggest probably part of the conspiracy that's popular right now, especially as our society, I think, becomes increasingly disillusioned with capitalism as we see it in the United States, is that millionaire banker J.P. Morgan had to do with the sinking, or perhaps knew that the ship was doomed ahead of time. He had a little inside info, right? Now, this entire theory is completely based on the fact that J.P. Morgan was scheduled to be on the Titanic, but changed his mind very shortly before it set sail. However, 3 of his rival millionaires, quote unquote, were all still on board and did in fact die. These 3 were John Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, okay? J.P. Morgan, to begin with, was an American banker, a railroad tycoon, and he absolutely dominated Wall Street throughout the Gilded Age of American economics. And he founded the banking firm that would become known as J.P. Morgan and Co., or is now known as J.P. Morgan Chase. He was a driving force of industrial consolidation in the U.S., aka acquiring and merging companies. He was a business tycoon, y'all. Like, just look at his Wikipedia if you want an idea, okay? There's too much for me to put in here just for a blurb, okay? It's too much. But because of this prominence that he held in the business and banking world, J.P. Morgan had a considerable influence on policy decisions. He was a staunch supporter of of the Federal Reserve. He was also the Progressive Era, which was a period of social activism. He was their leading financier and was dedicated to transforming the American economy, which included like social rights activism, women's rights activism, all those things. And that's honestly, it surprised me to learn that, okay? Upon his death, which was only about a year after the Titanic sank, the stock market in New York City closed for 2 hours while J.P. Morgan's body passed through the city. Like, that's an honor typically reserved for heads of state. That is how important this man was to the American economy. Now, if you don't know exactly what the Federal Reserve is, don't worry, I'll explain that in a few minutes. But first, I want to tell you why J.P. Morgan wasn't on the boat. Okay, now historians have hotly debated why he missed that fated trip on the Titanic, because he truly was scheduled to be on board. The conspiracies do have that correct, and he did miss his boarding. One Titanic expert, George Behe, said in an email to Reuters, whatever, that he could not find an authoritative 1912 source explaining why Morgan canceled on the trip. However, it can be confirmed that it did not happen mere hours beforehand, as the conspiracies claim. I have seen that like in a lot of TikTok videos, YouTube videos, where they're talking about the theory. Now, Titanic historian Don Lynch cites one of Morgan's biographers that France was changing its laws at the time to prevent Americans from exporting art treasures from France, like keeping things at home. So this theory says that Morgan went to get his shit out of France, which I get. A different source from the Titanic Historical Society says that this might be true, or like partly true at least. The official explanation given at the time, I think, was that Morgan was feeling ill. And wanted to, quote, take the cure at a spa in France with his mistress. So it could be one or it could be both of those. Although I guess if I was trying to be like kind of nonchalant about getting my shit out of a country before a law changed, maybe so that they couldn't stop him, I would rather admit that I'm going to a spa with my mistress than make the other one public. I don't know. But yeah, so that is the reasoning officially for JP Morgan not being on the Titanic. Okay, so that's important. Remember that. John Jacob Astor, John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, Astor, he was on the boat. He was a business magnate, a property tycoon, and a lieutenant colonel in the Spanish-American War, as well as being a well-known writer and inventor. Astor was the richest passenger aboard the Titanic and was thought to be among the richest people in the world at the time of his death, worth equivalent to $2.33 billion in 2020. And, you know, that was a time when you still built your wealth on the backs of other people, but it wasn't like it is today. Well, there's still legal slavery today. Anyway, John Jacob Astor built the Astoria Hotel, which later became known as the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, aka where Blair Waldorf lived at one point in Gossip Girl. So that's neat. A little modern tie-in. Now, the next person who is involved in this rival billionaires club is Isidor Straus. He was a Bavarian-born American. He was Jewish. He was the owner of Macy's department store, and he was a politician. He and his wife Ida died on board the ship because Ida refused to leave Isidor and would not get on a lifeboat at all without him. She is reported by witnesses to have said, quote, "I will not be separated from my husband. As we have lived, so we will die together." Ida instead gave her maid Ellen her fur coat and put her on lifeboat number 8. Witnesses described it as a remarkable exhibition of love and devotion. Isidor's body was found and buried in the family mausoleum, but unfortunately Ida's body was never found. The family collected water from the side of the wreck, though, and placed it in an urn in the mausoleum where Isidor was buried, in a beautiful symbol of togetherness. Forgive me for this, but very Achilles and Patroclus being, put in the same golden urn. Now, these two were depicted in the Titanic movie, and it seems to be pretty accurate as to how much they loved each other. They are actually, as the ship's sinking, the scene where there's a man and woman kissing and holding each other in the bed as their room floods with water. That's them. That is an iconic scene. That is Isidor and Ida. Imagine that kind of love. That's beautiful. In an interesting fun fact tied to modern day, because that's my shit, they are the great-great-grandparents of pop star King Princess. So, there's your fun fact. Now, the other member of the rival billionaires club was Benjamin Guggenheim, an American businessman and mining boss. He boarded the Titanic with his mistress, a French singer, his valet, his chauffeur, and his mistress's maid. His mistress, Leontine, and her maid, Emma, survived the sinking. Guggenheim and the other men died in the sinking, though. In a kind of funny twist, I think is funny, Guggenheim actually slept through the collision with the iceberg, but the ladies felt the collision, woke them up, or they were already awake, I don't know, and they went into his room and woke him up. And his valet was like, "What do I care? It's an iceberg." But they persuaded the men to get up and get dressed, and somebody directed them up to the deck, up to the deck of the ship. And Guggenheim put the ladies on a lifeboat, and he was like, hey, no worries, this is just for safety while they repair the ship. Like, just chill out, we'll all be back together in a little while. But he knew that wasn't true. And witnesses who survived have reported that he and his valet helped women and children load the lifeboats. Then they went back to their cabin in first class to dress in evening wear and, quote, go down like gentlemen. He asked someone who survived that if he should die, that this man would get a message to his wife, from whom he was estranged for business reasons, which is interesting. And the message was that he died in doing his duty. He was one of the most prominent American victims to fall victim to the Titanic. So, it's just really sad. Like a very interesting group that lost their lives. Just those three were just very interesting. And I wanted to give you that backstory on the four of them so you could understand a little bit more about the theory, okay? Now, supposedly, this theory goes that J.P. Morgan wanted these men dead because they opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve. Like I said, I forgot the words earlier, but they opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve, or as we often know it, the Fed. And that is the central banking system of the United States. It was created on December 23rd of 1913 with the enactment of the Federal Reserve Act after a series of financial panics, especially the Panic of 1907, which J.P. Morgan was very involved in kind of squashing that financial panic. He had a lot to do with it not going farther than it did. And so these panics led to the desire for a centralized control of the monetary system in order to alleviate crises, which we have seen that doesn't always work. But interestingly, the Great Depression, the recession in the 2000s, and hell, probably the one that we're seeing right now, have all led to the expansion of the roles and responsibilities of the Fed. Now, J.P. Morgan was super involved in the creation. He was, like I said, a staunch supporter. And not everybody was was into this because it could limit the amount of money that some people could make, right? It put limits on their wealth, I suppose. And so that's why a ton of people were against it. But interestingly, okay, this theory takes a hit because Astor and Guggenheim, neither of them took a public stance on the creation of the Fed, and Isidor Straus is recorded as having been a supporter of the Federal Reserve. So that really, that adds some wish-wash to this theory that sounds kind of sound, right? At first, at least, when you say it in a 1-minute version for TikTok. So, there are versions of the theory, though, where the sinking was arranged for, but that it wasn't J.P. Morgan who did it. Now, there's a big theory that it was actually the Rothschild family who also did not have a family member representative on board. Now, the Rothschilds are a banking family who have been at the center of conspiracy theories for a really long time, including even like Da Vinci Code style theories where the Rothschilds were the descendants of Jesus or they were the hiders of Jesus' child with Mary Magdalene, etc., etc. The Vatican wanted the child dead because whatever, I don't know. Anyway, these are like wild theories, so it's a lot. But some sources point to the constant involvement of the Rothschild family in international conspiracies as just an anti-Semitic trope, where they want to place some kind of blame or responsibility or just a spooky aura in general around this super powerful, super wealthy Jewish family, which is fair. Like, it's fair that that is a theory about this, because it very well could just be a centuries-long attempt at defaming a family that went from ill-intentioned, jealous neighbors spreading rumors inspired into a full-blown global conspiracy that you just can't get rid of, right? I don't know. I think it probably does have a lot to do with anti-Semitism, especially to begin with, I would say. Now I would say, I will say that I have heard theories about the Rothschild family for years from watching, like, you know, History Channel shows and stuff like that about the Da Vinci Code and about, you know, this and that and the other. And the Rothschilds are always pulled into it, especially Knights Templar and the Masons and the Da Vinci Code, all of that. The Rothschilds are always pulled in. I had no idea that they were Jewish. So I think that you can't, I don't know if you can say that today it all comes from anti-Semitism, but I'm sure that it doesn't help that there are anti-Semitic people still perpetuating the rumor for that reason. But anyway, I don't think that the Rothschild family had anything to do with the sinking of the Titanic, because it seems like a reach. What's the point? There's no reason. Just that they fucking wanted to sink a ship? There's no reason for that. That's stupid. But I will say that I think every powerful family has connections to things that we, the average plebeian, knows nothing of. So, could the Rothschilds just be completely innocent bystanders who are just doing their own thing and everybody keeps talking shit about them? Yes, 1,000,000,000%. They probably are. Do they also probably know some bad people here and there? Or, like, somebody in there has known some bad people? Yes, 100%. But I don't know. Anyway, please don't sue me. This is just theorizing. The thing is, though, that the Rothschild theory has picked up extra traction in recent years, thanks to QAnon, those psychos, connected to a far-right extremist conspiracy detailing a plot by, quote, the deep state against Donald Trump. Okay. If a family is that old and that powerful and that wealthy that they can sink the Titanic, why do they care about Donald Trump? I just want to know. Anyway. But then, as we wrap up, there is also another side to the conspiracy where it was insurance fraud, and that was all. It was just insurance fraud. The White Star Line, which were the owners of the Titanic, they switched the Titanic with the Olympic in construction. The Titanic and Olympic are both super famous. Obviously, Titanic, infamous, I suppose, and the Olympic, famous by association. The theory goes that the Olympic, which was an older ship than the Titanic, but very similar, was damaged in a transatlantic trip, and that it was taken back to Harland and Wolff's in Belfast, Ireland for repairs, at which point it was found too heavily damaged to make repairing it profitable. Like, if they repaired it, they'd just be sinking too much money into it. So they did up the Olympic a little extra special, painted over the name, and they switched them out so they could claim the insurance money from the, quote, Titanic to cover the losses of the Olympic, which honestly seems to make a lot of sense in a lot of ways on the surface, right? But I found two significant sources that said that the insurance money wouldn't have been nearly enough to cover the loss of the Olympic. That being said, it doesn't mean that the White Star Line wasn't trying to reduce losses. I mean, like, you know, if you lose a whole $10, wouldn't you rather just losing $6 and keeping $4? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's possible. But I don't know. When you really dive into that one, also not the strongest theory, but it sounds really good when you say it in a 1-minute TikTok, I will admit. Kind of like the rest of these theories. They sound good. They sound good on the surface. They sound good in a TikTok. But when you really get into the information, it's not there. The Reuters fact check team actually did a whole article on all of these theories, and their eventual decision that I concur with, okay, was that this conspiracy had just taken too many facts out of context to be held as plausible pretty much at all. There are definitely parts of this theory that sound very reasonable. There are parts, obviously, that sound absolutely batcrap crazy. But I think truly, after reading about it myself, after reading about all of the people involved as well as the sources behind the conspiracies, I have to say, I think that the Titanic sinking was an accident. Or, I mean, it was some kind of worst case accidental scenario where some guy wasn't paying attention, something like that, but it wasn't done on purpose. I don't think that there is a conspiracy behind it where we can point to this person or this family doing it to get something out of it. I really don't. That is what my intuition, and I have some good intuition, that is what my intuition tells me, based on the information, based on the facts, based on people who have spent their lives studying the Titanic, which is wild that you can be a historian who specializes in the Titanic. But I think it was an accident. I think that these conspiracy theories only hold water. Oh shit. They hold water just like the Titanic. Oh no, that was so bad. Okay, I think that these conspiracies only, I can't think of anything right now that doesn't sound awful. Anyway, these conspiracies are only seem decent when you say them in a super dramatic way, in a dramatic voice, with dramatic music, in a 1-minute video. Like, there's literally, because here, we just spent 30 minutes and I debunked it pretty decently. Didn't even take 30 minutes if I didn't have to explain, like, the back information and stuff. Like, yeah, so I'm going to go out on a pretty strong branch and say that I think that the Titanic truly was an accident. And that is okay. That is a fine thing to think. If you, however, have some kind of information that it was not an accident, if you firmly believe that it was a conspiracy and you have a good reason, I want you to send it to me. I want you to email me, I'veBeenThinkingPod@gmail.com, and tell me about it, or DM me on Instagram at I'veBeenThinkingPod on Instagram. Tweet me at BeenThinkingPod. Tell me why you think the Titanic was sank on purpose. If you truly think that, send me your evidence because I want to know. I want to know what makes you think that. I'm not kidding. I want to understand. If you can change my mind, like, I want you to change my mind. So, let me know. Again, like I said earlier, make sure that you are subscribed to Patreon. If you're not subscribed to Patreon, you're definitely listening to this on a Friday. If you're subscribed to Patreon, this came out on Thursday. So, I'm not saying they're better than you, but they get treated better. So, something to keep in mind. Like I said, follow the Instagram. Check the website, I'veBeenThinkingPod.com/blog for, the deets from today's episode, the sources and stuff, a little transcript, all that good stuff. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/I'veBeenThinkingPod. And I appreciate you all. I appreciate you so much. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I truly do. And I hope to see you next week. Well, to talk at you next week. Bye.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Come unwrap some holiday magic this season in Denver, where the lights are brighter and the shopping is grander, where the season feels a whole lot more wonderful. Discover great hotels and more things to do at milehighholidays.com.